All right, welcome back to Visions for the Future of Higher Ed, everyone. Today, I'm super excited to introduce Jennifer Dobbs-Oates. She is the Associate Vice Provost for World Readiness at Purdue University with an extremely experienced background as a clinical professor. Prior to that, focusing on work with undergraduate students. She's also a newly certified SEE board member with the Society for Experiential Education. And that's actually where Jen and I met. I caught her presentation with Emily Carpenter, the AVP at Nazareth University, on experiential education for a connected university, where you've actually also recently contributed a video to the SEE Journal. I'm going to ask you later on about how we can check that out, Jen, to get a sense of what you're contributing and what that journal is all about. But first of all, thank you so much for making time to be part of the podcast and to share your insights as a thought leader. I know a ton of people came out to your session in Niagara Falls, excited to hear what you have to say. So I'm really grateful you're here to share insights with this community. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Imran. I'm really glad to be here with you today, and thanks for the invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. And the first question I always like to ask, because everyone has such a unique answer to this initial question, is what made you want to pursue a career in higher education, Jen? And I know for you, you've been involved in so many different aspects of the work that's going on at Purdue, but where did it all start for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, like probably a lot of college students, I went to college not really sure what I wanted to do. I started majoring in pharmacy largely because I was a strong student in math and science, and people told me, "Well, that's a good field." And I said, okay. And I went to my classes and was very diligent because that was in my nature. But as I kind of went to those classes and pursued the things that were part of that field, I didn't see myself in the field. I didn't see myself in the work. And so I explored, as I think that is one of the things that college is for. And so I was fortunate to have a chance to kind of look around me and see what other options there were. And I really found myself drawn to psychology and to the study of children and their learning and development, which, if I looked back at my life, I would have seen that was there all the time. I just wasn't really sure what I would want to do with that. And what I found as a college student was if I found something that I was really passionate and excited about, and I was sure that that passion, that excitement, that interest would always be there, then it felt okay that I didn't know exactly how I would use it. I figured I could keep pursuing it and the exactly how I would find that in due time. And that's kind of how it worked out because I kept wanting to go deeper and wanting to go further. And for me, that led me to a PhD in clinical psychology with a focus on children and families. And that's something that you can use in a wide variety of ways. And as I kept trying out those wide variety of ways, I found lots of things I enjoyed. But what I found that I enjoyed the most was the context of learning and the context of a university. And I found that I didn't really ever want to leave that. I wanted to continue to live the university life and be a part of working with students.
That's amazing. I always find that encouraging when people can be honest that way, Jen, and say, I wasn't quite sure, but I really like the way you framed it as you just knew you enjoyed it and that you were passionate about it and you were kind of willing to let things play out as you went through the experience. And I think a lot of times people can get hung up and worried that they don't have an end goal in sight or they're not sure what they're going to do with this passion. And so they kind of leave it aside and then suddenly you end up in a role you're not passionate about. And in retrospect, it makes sense why you've left it behind. But it's nice to know that you don't have to know exactly where things are going to just continue learning and enjoying what you do. And it actually reminds me I know in the news recently I heard about Jane Goodall, unfortunately passing
Mhm.
away. But the story is very similar to what you just said, Jen, where, this was someone who just had a very unique interest and ended up taking it to a level I'm not sure anyone could have expected. So thanks for sharing that. And you've gone on now to kind of leverage that experience as a leader in the industry, a true leader at Purdue, but also in the field of higher educational, specifically in experiential education. And what sorts of things have you noticed are challenging for leaders right now? I know there are many tricky things going on in higher education, but what sorts of things are you working on, and what sorts of things have you taken from that background that are helping you address some of the challenges you're working on now?
Yeah. It's a difficult time, I'll be honest, and I always try to be frank with my colleagues that I work with because I think, we have to honor the challenge that people are experiencing, our students are experiencing, and we who work in higher ed are experiencing a time that is really difficult. And it's true, I think when I was younger, I never imagined that working in higher ed would mean working in a field under attack, but there is a level of attack that the field is experiencing right now. And so it's a pretty challenging period. But even so, I think that that means that we have to reorient ourselves to our why. It's a really important thing to think about, why are we doing the work and why are we engaged in this field? And for me, that always means going back to the students. And so going back to thinking about the fact that when we're in a time of crisis, we focus on the students and the fact that, particularly with college education, this is the moment that they are in college, and this is the moment that they have to spend some time to invest in themselves and to shape what will come next for them. And of course, you can go educate yourself at a different point in your life and at a later time in your life. But we know that for a lot of people, there's a window where your world kind of gives you some time and
Yeah.
that investment is really important. And so I think that orienting ourselves to our why and our motivation becomes a really important thing to draw from.
No doubt, and I think that's something that a lot of leaders will appreciate hearing, Jen, who are looking to someone like you for advice, insights, reassurance, and I can imagine the students appreciate that who do get a chance to work with you. That's something I took away from your session is that when there's the uncertainty, you kind of look to people who are leading by example. And even just you saying that, this is a time that we're trying to figure things out, but you don't have to know it all. I think I think people need a place to figure those things out, and that's to me what higher ed is all about: is being around people who are going to help facilitate that journey for you and give you a place to learn, not necessarily just have things set in stone. Like this is a place to learn and change. And so another thing I'm hearing is there are also a lot of emerging leaders in this space, people who are looking to continue, making a contribution to higher education. Would you have advice from, what it's been like for you being a leader for new leaders who are trying to help navigate a time like this and take on a leadership role?
That's an excellent question. I think it's really important to find folks that you can trust and find folks that you can collaborate with. There's a lot. Higher ed is a wide and diverse place, and it can be very hierarchical and it can be very traditional. And uh, sometimes it can be very ruthless. It's
Mm.
true. But it also can be very collaborative and it can be very encouraging. I think about a place like the Society for Experiential Education, where you and I met at that conference. That's a conference that has come to become my very favorite gathering every single year. And I knew it would be that way the very first time I went to that gathering, which I think was way back in maybe 2014, because at that very first gathering I happened to go to, I found a place where people were free with their knowledge and their solutions and their resources. They weren't hoarding their information and they weren't showing off their expertise in a way that made them puffed up. They were saying, I have something that's worked for me. Maybe it will also work for you. And so, for new leaders in the space, I think it's so important to find places and communities where that kind of ethos happens because we can learn from one another and we can benefit from one another if we find trusted communities of practice.
That's such a tangible solution, Jen. I think that makes so much sense. And I would encourage people to come out to the SEE events. It's an extremely welcoming community. It was my first time there. And I truly can echo what you're saying. Each presentation had people who were so genuinely excited to share what was working and answer questions. If you were from an institution where some of these things might not have been done before, or you weren't sure how to navigate something, you could tell it was a group of people who really was there to try and help each other. And so I haven't heard that answer before, and it makes a ton of sense. Come out, be part of the community, and you certainly will find people who can mentor you and answer questions. That's a great point, and it kind of leads me to the next question, which is really at the heart of this podcast series, and that's around the hope in higher education. I know we talk a lot about the struggle and the challenges that the industry is facing right now, but what I like to focus on is what sorts of stories deserve more attention, especially as someone who's now heavily involved in SEE. Are there any stories that come to mind for you where things are going well, where someone's doing something that we can draw a little attention to say, hey, like this is a great example of how we can keep higher ed moving in the right direction, whether it's at Purdue or beyond for you, Jen?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about these different stories and one that really made an impact on me over the course of the last year. Some of my colleagues at Purdue in the department I come from as a faculty member, human development and family science, they started a new program last year called Say It Big, and it's kind of an elevator pitch competition. And the idea is to have students develop a 3-minute pitch where they talk about the impact of their participation in HDFS, that's our field, human development, family science, right? HDFS related experiential learning. And by talking about that impact on them, what happens for those of us who went to kind of see the competition, I was on the panel of judges. What happens is it was like the most, I don't know, it was like emotional intellectual candy. It was amazing. It was like sitting there and being fed these incredible stories of impact of how by participating in these opportunities, these students developed and learned and grew in amazing ways that really mattered to them. And these students got up there and in 3 minutes told their stories in the most persuasive and memorable ways they possibly could, because they wanted to win the prize.
Yeah.
And they did a terrific job, and it was so compelling, and it was so uplifting, and it really just kind of hit you that here were example after example of the difference that was being made. It's very exciting to me.
Yeah, that is a really cool approach to it. And it makes me think a lot about how important reflection is for experiential education as a whole. But that's a really interesting way to motivate students to reflect on the difference these programs have made in their life. And that's not always easy to do because I was recently talking to some students about, an opportunity they had gone through, and it was a co-op based experience. And I was like, how did it go? What happened? What did you learn? And they're like, oh, not much, nothing really. But I sort of knew I was expecting that answer. And once you start digging a little deeper, oh, that's strange. Well, did you get a chance to do this or that or the other? You do start to hear and almost see them recognize a lot more happened than they initially realize. So I think that's a really cool way to get them thinking about these things. And for a school that might not have organized something that before, were you part of organizing it? Do you have any advice on how to set up a competition like that?
Well, my colleagues really did the heavy lifting. I got to come in at the end and be the judge who was fresh to it. But I'll say it was an enormous hit. It went over so well. They're doing it again this year. A couple things that I saw that worked really, really well. They really thought about the whole process and supporting students through it. So in order to participate, students needed to come to a workshop that helped them understand what the purpose was and gave them real training in the idea. The department made faculty mentors available to coach students and give them practice before the event itself. So, an investment in the students like that, so that by the time the event comes around, there's real and on display, really went a long way.
That's amazing. That and again, very tangible. So having, you know, there be guidance around the competition and some structure that students can I think that again is a huge part of what higher education is all about is just giving students a structure to follow and then kind of adapting to again each unique student's experience. And I can imagine that being what made the story so interesting to hear is that they knew what they needed to do, but then you hear how many different sorts of
Yeah.
experiences they've been through. Did any unique ones stand out? Is there any ones you remember that would be,
Oh my gosh.
but I'm
They
sure there's a
were
lot of them.
They were remarkable. They were also very different and distinct.
Mhm.
You know, there was a student who had been on a study abroad trip to Morocco and really talked about that immersion into a different culture and the challenge that that presented to her. There was a student who had experience working in the child development lab school that our department runs, and she tied it beautifully into her own experiences playing school as a kid and what she remembered being like in her little childhood bedroom playing school with her stuffed animals,
Yeah.
and then what she could do as a more grown person and what was now she took from that. There were just really charming and amazing stories.
That I think that at a time like this is extremely important. I hope people will, listen to that idea and implement it because I think that goes right back to what you're saying, the why. And when you hear what it means to students, it's very invigorating. And that's very genuine to hear about a story that connects all the way back to a childhood experience like that. But it reminds me about another question I wanted to ask you, Jen, which is, having a student participate in an experience abroad in somewhere like Morocco. Is that a large part of the work you're doing with World Readiness is setting up opportunities for students to do these types of experiences abroad and as such?
It's a piece of it. So, when we talk about world readiness at Purdue, we think about that as sort of student success beyond graduation. So, we're thinking about the things that students participate in during their college experience that really prepares them for success after they graduate in broad and deep kinds of ways. So, that can include global kinds of experiences and cultural kinds of experiences, that can include success in their professional life. That can include civic engagement and leadership opportunities. That can include thriving in life and well being. We know a lot of things about college and what it contributes to, right? The research tells us that, college graduates are, happier at work. They're more likely to vote. They actually live longer. They're more likely to stay married. There are all these incredible outcomes. But we don't know as much about what we can do intentionally at college that really contributes to that. Some of that just seems to be a little bit of an artifact rather than a thing that we're really intentionally instilling. And so I think that the world readiness model is about being really intentional and really thinking about college as an experience that is about many things and about whole people. I often joke that our students are not just brains on sticks. They are complete people who are going to have careers and families and lives and, you know, lots of components to their world. And we'd like their college experience to help equip them in many ways.
It's a great point, and I think sometimes, again, yeah, that can be forgotten, that it's not just about getting a degree or a diploma or a certification. It's about helping people become well-rounded and find a way to enjoy the work they're doing as part of a full life. So I think that's a great point and a great thing to be keeping top of mind. Again, not something that I hear spoken about often. For schools that are trying to figure that out, how to prepare students for the future, have there been any lessons learned in the work you've done so far that we can use to guide schools who are trying to move away from just focusing on something like graduation rates to it is a bit of an intangible thing to track the
Yeah.
happiness and the overall well-being of students, but what sorts of things have come up so far?
Yeah, it is a intangible and it is challenging, right? It's some of the stuff beyond graduation can be hard to assess and hard to follow students for
Yes.
longer periods of time. So I think there's some challenge in that and there's a time commitment in that. It's just going to take us longer to gather that information. So we have to deal with that, the commitment that that requires. But I think there's also a commitment that it requires just up front in um, sort of our ideology and the way that we think about things. When people talk about college and sort of its value or its purpose, I often see a kind of an either or discussion happening, kind of a battle going on where there's this debate about whether college is for getting a good job or whether it's for the life of the mind and things like civic engagement or critical thinking. Right. And these things are often pitted against each other in popular culture or in even in the academy. We often see these things as if they are two different things and we have to pick one side. And the argument that I would make is that at least when we're talking about the kinds of universities that I come from, we're talking about a 4-year residential education. This is a big commitment of time. This is a big chunk of time and investment and money and people. It's not quick. And you know what? We can do both of those things in that amount of time. And our students deserve both of those things. Having a good solid preparation for a meaningful career that could support you and having like a foundation for critical thinking and engaging with the world and engaging with democracy, being able to graduate with both of those things, I think that's something we could accomplish in 4 years. And in fact, I think it's our responsibility. And so when I think about this sort of battle that's going on rhetorically, I think it's a distraction. I think it's nonsense. And I would really challenge higher education and governments and students and parents to stand up and say, I reject that. I say both and. We're going to require both of these things.
I second that, Jen. It's such a great point because I do often hear students after graduation saying something along the lines of, I wish I engaged in more of the school activities. I feel like all I did was study. Or on the flip side, I wish I went to school a little later. I wasn't ready to pick what I was going to focus my attention on and learn. And now, if I could go back, I feel like I'd be such a better student. But I think, to your point, fostering an environment where both of those things can happen together. And to go back to your earlier point, it's okay to change and adjust and figure out, hey, this degree wasn't right. I'm going to do that in a place where people can guide you and help you stay open minded and learn how to divide your attention between these very equally important aspects of life. That to me sounds like a college experience that you don't have to defend because I think people are going to gravitate towards that. And at all phases of life, I can see that also being something that people want to return to, as mid career professionals. Hey, I need to go back to that and reset. I see a lot of people changing careers right now too. It's
Sure.
beyond higher ed. A lot of people are trying to figure out what's next for them. And they're thinking about, is it going back to college? And if that's the experience you can expect, I can see that just again bolstering encouraging people to do that because it is a place where it's not singular, like you said. It's this much broader experience that you're going through. So I think it's a really refreshing thing to hear that that's where your leadership perspective is coming from. And the last thing I'll ask you, I don't have a ton more of your time, but is there something you're excited about in the future? Is there an initiative you're working on, a tool, or something that you hope happens as you continue to be part of the field of higher education and beyond that would be exciting to have, be part of the experience or that students can leverage in some way, some sort of future vision for higher education?
Yeah. I am working on something that I am very excited about. My last answer may have given away that I can be a little ambitious when I get thinking about this stuff.
That's
But
good.
I'm a huge believer in reflection and the power that it has and how important it is for all of us as lifelong learners. And so I've created this concept that we're building out a vision for at Purdue to really embed opportunities to reflect in many more places than they currently exist. And the idea is rather than sort of building it as a new program, which tends to be something students have to know about and then seek out and choose to do, we're going to embed it as a practice that can be just added into all kinds of ongoing things that already exist. And the concept is to make reflection ubiquitous and unavoidable so that it just shows up where students already are. And when we do that, it becomes part of the fabric of life in such a way that it will eventually become second nature to students. If I can do that, I can really change things in a way that I think will matter.
I'm very excited to see how that plays out, Jen. I think it's an incredible skill for life. And if it's something that you get good at in college, I think it will stay with you and it I think will have a profound impact. So that's really exciting to hear. I'm excited for Purdue and for anyone watching the way you do things to pick up on that and try to stay up to date on what you're doing there. And that's the very last question I have for you is how can people learn more about the work you're doing and how to get involved with something like the Society for Experiential Education or the journal itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So you are certainly easily able to find me at Purdue or via LinkedIn. I am serving as vice president right now for the Society for Experiential Education. That's a great way to connect with me. And I'm always at the conference. I love it. It is my favorite annual event. And then the journal, the Experiential Learning and Teaching in Higher Education, is the official journal of the Society. I'm on the editorial board there, and that's a wonderful venue to really have a scholarly conversation about experiential education topics. And I always encourage people to look to that maybe as a venue for your work, maybe join us as a reviewer, maybe just read. And one of the great opportunities there is that it's an open access journal. You can publish there with no fees, you can read it without a subscription. All you have to do is get a login because we would love to know who's reading because that helps us to share our impact. Nobody will spam you, I promise. Just log in.
I can confirm that. I'll make sure to provide links in the description here, everyone. If you want to check that out, I again really encourage you to do so. And I just want to say thank you again, Jen, for sharing your insights and time today. Truly appreciate it, and I hope to see you again at SEE. Again, it's I've been to many conferences, and it was a truly warm experience. And so, really appreciate you making time for this today.
Thank you for the time, Imran. This was a delight.
So I hope you'll join us again in the future to update us on some of these big plans. I think they're really exciting.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Have a good one.